Welcome to Latino Librarians, Leading Change and Shaping the Future, a symposium presented by the San Jose State University School of Information and Reforma, the National Association to promote library and information services to Latinos and the Spanish-speaking. My name is Loida Garcia-Fibo, and I'm delighted to moderate this event today, and I would like to welcome Dr. Anthony Chow, Director of the San Jose State University School of Information.
Thank you, Lloyd. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all. Muchas gracias for joining us today in the celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month 2024. Please take a moment to share and chat where you're joining us. It always is great to see how diverse our attendees are. We're delighted that this is the fourth consecutive year we've offered this symposium in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. We're especially excited to be co-sponsoring this event with Reforma, and I want to thank all of our distinguished guests for taking the time to join us today. Please subscribe to our EDI YouTube channel, and let me drop that into the chat, where you'll see 3 years of recordings from all 9 federally recognized Heritage Months. And now it gives me great pleasure to hand the mic back over to my good friend and an amazing global leader. I don't know where you get the energy, Loida Garcia-Fibo, who will serve as the moderator for today's symposium. Loida?
Thank you. Thank you. And happy Hispanic Heritage Month, week and day to everybody. And here we are. These are the San Jose State University. But Latinos celebrate every day. The Hispanic Heritage Month began as a week in 1968 to recognize the contributions of the Hispanic community, which gained momentum throughout the 1960s when the civil rights movement was at its peak, and there was a growing awareness of the United States' multicultural identities. And here we have legends from Reforma, the National Association to promote library information services to Latinos and Spanish-speaking. And I will show some slides as I speak, and they're all from different Latino leaders and events. In 1988, Congress passed a bill establishing the celebration from September 15 to October 15. And librarians have been at the forefront of all these movements too. In 1971, Reforma, the National Association to promote library and information services, was established by Dr. Arnulfo Trejo and other amazing trailblazers. And we have Dr. Arnulfo Trejo towards the left of our screen. I hope it's your left too. And here are some other colleagues. These are our game changers, Latino leaders in librarianship in this country. And as per the U.S. Census most recent data, there are 65.2 million Hispanics in the U.S., making it the nation's largest racial or ethnic minority, 19% of the total population. There are states with 1 million or more Hispanic residents, and these are 13 states, I should say: Arizona, California, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Washington. And so I wanted to spell that out. And the median age of our Hispanic population, and the most recent data is from 2023, was 31 years. So Hispanics are kind of young overall, right? And here we have a very interesting chart from the U.S. Census. It's not very recent, but it's the most recent they have in terms of disclosing the countries this way. And we can see the largest group within Latino groups are Mexican and then Puerto Ricans and so on. To echo scholars, I would like to distinguish some terms used. These terms encompass culture, ethnicity, and identity, and are rooted in shared cultures and not racial categories. And they are more nuanced, but just to share a very general description at this time. Latino refers to individuals of Latin American descent. Hispanic describes individuals from Spanish-speaking countries, particularly those in Latin America and Spain, focusing on language rather than geography. Latinx, a gender-neutral term that includes individuals of Latin American descent, aiming to be inclusive of non-binary and gender non-conforming identities. When using one of these terms, Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, to refer to a specific person, always respect their preference. For example, I consider myself a Latina. I prefer that term, but I'm not opposed to Hispanic or Latinx either. It is important to know that Latinos also have a different beautiful heritage. I am of Greek heritage. We have colleagues that are Mexico-Iranian, Chinese-Mexican, German-Venezuelan, and so on. And this is one of the reasons why Latino librarians and Reforma International Relations Committee, of which I am a co-chair, have presented events such as the Chinese Experience in Latin America, in celebration of Filipino librarians, and Reforma Afro-Latina Affinity Group has presented events, for instance, about the Puerto Rican American scholar, Arturo Schomburg, who was of African and German descent. So we are very varied. And Latinos definitely have also brought significant and transformative contributions to librarianship in this country. And we're going to learn more about this during today's event. And now, without further ado, I would like to welcome our keynote speaker today is Becky Calzada. She is the first Latina president of the American Association of School Librarians. It's my pleasure to welcome Becky today.
So thank you so much for having me here today. I loved everything that you shared, and I'm excited to just join you all and learn along with you and participate in the panel after this too. So the title of my presentation is The Power of the Nudge. And in case you didn't notice, I am coming to you from Central Texas. I am Texas born and raised, grew up in South Texas. In fact, here's a picture of me. This is a picture of me. I think I'm like in first grade-ish. I grew up in deep South Texas in a little small town called Mercedes, which is also known as the Queen City of the Rio Grande Valley. My mom, well, first of all, I'm a first generation high school and college graduate. My mom was born in Bolivia, in Cochabamba, Bolivia, and she came to this country at 15 at the behest of an ambassador who she was working for in Bolivia. And I am constantly awed by the fact that my grandmother let her go at that age to this country alone with her. But it changed her life, and it allowed her to be open to opportunities for her as a teenager, and of course just changed her life overall because, you know, here I am today. My dad was born in Mexico. His mom was actually a U.S. citizen and who married my grandfather, who was a Mexican citizen. And unfortunately, he didn't realize that he could have become or could declare himself as an American citizen, but found his way here eventually. And of course, my parents met. And I think about these events for both of them and how you just never know where these events are going to take you. For them, they were only, you know, educated up to middle school and had to work to support their families because they were both, my dad was raised in a very large family, 9 kids. My mom was in a family of 5, and you know, she had to work. She was the oldest and had to work too. So when I think about that, the lack of education on their end, they recognize the impact of public education, and so they made sure that I got to school. I mean, we weren't a poor family, but we weren't necessarily well off. My mom made my clothes. You know, we didn't go out a lot. Just very humble, you know, kind of means. But we went to the library all the time because we didn't have a lot of books in our home. And so we got to visit the Hector P. Garcia Library in Mercedes. And when I think about me and my journey, I was very shy. I was overweight. I just felt kind of awkward, and books were that sanctuary for me. But again, because my parents supported me and believed in the power of education, they saved up for me to go to college. And of course, again, being a first generation, the oldest, the girl, they did not want me to go too far away. They wanted to protect me. But I did end up going about 200 miles away and attended what is now A&M Kingsville. I call it A&I Kingsville, which is near Corpus Christi. And kind of set my sights on being a teacher. I was that kid that played teacher all the time, but I think, libraries weren't even on my periphery as far as becoming a librarian. But it's mostly because I just don't even think that I recognized that that was even an option, but I saw teaching as an option. I will say this, that I'm of the generation that was told to not speak Spanish in school. My parents didn't worried about me being put in a bilingual classroom because back then, 50 years ago, it wasn't the best education at the time because it was not equitable. And there were a lot of integration sort of issues happening at that time too. And so when I think about that and I think about where we are today and how families are all begging to be in a dual language classroom because they recognize the power of learning multiple languages. It makes me proud that we've come a long way, although we're not exactly where we need to be, but we've definitely come full circle in that. I really wanted to kind of talk about the power of a nudge because I think about this a lot, and I mention it a lot. If you've had a chance to hear me speak, or maybe even you've been the receiver of a nudge. My journey as a school librarian came because of a nudge. After I finished college, I became a first grade teacher in Bishop, Texas, and there was a Latina librarian there, and she knew that I loved to come to the library with my class, with my first graders. I brought them often. I took books from the library back to our classroom, and because I knew that literacy was powerful, and I was working in a school district that had a high number of students on free and reduced lunch. I maybe had one parent volunteer if I was lucky. And so I really wanted to enrich those students with vocabulary, and I wanted them to learn what books could bring and how they could change their lives. This particular librarian invited me to go ask me about becoming a librarian because she knew about my passion for books. And that little one nudge challenged me to go with her to go to an author symposium where I got to meet Tommy DePaula, who I just adored at the time, and I was just mesmerized by him and the books he wrote, and then thought, oh, I want to do that too. But being a mom of two young children, I really wanted to prioritize them, and so just kind of tucked the idea away. But I will say this: eventually, I came to a place where I was going to get a divorce, and I realized that maybe this would be the time to really think about becoming a librarian. And I had never really explored this before, but one of the things I quickly discovered in our very large state of Texas is that there are only a certain amount of library schools, and the furthest one south was at the University of Texas. And of course, back then, there was only an in-person kind of option. And so I had to move to Austin, which I did, to go to school. But that little nudge to think about becoming a librarian changed my life, because when I think about it, it got me into becoming a school librarian, but it also got me into participating in an organization like the Texas Library Association. That particular association, just like any other associations and groups, you meet people that are like-minded, that help you to see the possibility of things that can be. And they also recognize certain leadership qualities in me and nudged me into considering to apply for our Leadership Institute. And of course, that led to me to becoming the chair for the School Library Division, which is the largest division for our state association. We have about 5,000 school librarians in the state of Texas. And so that one little move and that one suggestion to become a librarian truly changed my life. And of course, eventually it got me involved at the national level with AASL. And I think about getting involved with like the Policy Corps, Unite Against Book Bans. All of these things happened because I had one person say to me, have you thought about becoming a librarian? And when I think about this, and I had an interview with Publishers Weekly in June, I think about this often because I wonder what would have happened if somebody hadn't said to me, have you thought about this one thing? And so I really make it my business to look around the room, see who's there, think about the people that I meet, and encourage them to do things that maybe they never had considered before. I think so many professionals don't recognize or see the qualities, or maybe are nervous and aren't very sure of themselves. And I believe in the power of that nudge, because sometimes that nudge can be life-changing. So when I think about back to this little girl, this very shy little girl who had to be ripped off of her mom's leg to go to school because she was just so afraid. And then when I reflect about where I am now, I recognize that I'm here because of the family who believed in me, who nudged me to be a reader, who also continue to support me in this role today as a president. Like, I think about the travel I have to do. I've got a daughter and her husband who support me. In fact, they were the people that said, you need to try this because you could impact so many people and share amazing things with the people that you meet. And so I also think about the educators that nudged me along the way and that helped to build my confidence. I think about even just like Loida today. I was, when she first reached out, I was like, you want to talk to me? And I think we just never realize that, you meet people and you wonder, like, are they going to remember me? Or, are they going to, because I know a lot of people, but I just recognize too, when you just meet one person one time, like, there's just so many people that you meet, are they going to remember? But just to know that people see who you are and recognize the potential is one, inspiring, but also exciting, because if that can happen to me, I know I could possibly be that person for somebody else. And so I just really, my big takeaway for everybody is that I want everybody to recognize that when you see somebody that has qualities that are important, that could, be used and leveraged in a way to advocate for school librarians, that could be advocates for the power of inclusive books, encourage them, because that nudge can lead to great things. And while I know that, there might be some work involved, and that's important. I think, like Andrew Carnegie said, anything in life worth having is worth working for. And if I know anything about the people that I work with, they're willing to work hard because they're willing to serve their profession. They're willing to serve their time to help impact others and to make our profession better. And again, just thinking about, as we also want to consider, for me, a priority is to always change the landscape of even the professionals that I work with. I recognize in school librarianship, I'm working with predominantly white people. How can we change that? Well, the only way for us to change that is to encourage other Latinas, other Latinos to consider it as a career. But if we aren't intentional and nudging people to consider the possibility, they may just not even recognize that that's an option. And so I am so grateful for the opportunity to speak with everyone today and to share. And I hope that you remember that a nudge can be life-changing for people, and never underestimate what that can do for others. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Becky. This is so important what you have mentioned. A nudge at a time will also help us to bring change, right? That's how change is made. And change is something that is ongoing. So we can't say, oh, we brought change. We need to continue working on it.
I agree. I share often when I present about, and when we start talking about book bans and people are like, is what I do making a difference? And I tell the story of a prisoner of war that was captured by the German army. And he really wanted to support his homeland. And one of his jobs was to go and pick potatoes to send to the front lines to the German soldiers. And what he decided to do was to take a rusted nail and he would poke the potatoes he was packing in his pack to send to the front with the hope that that one little move would cause the potatoes to rot by the time they reach the front lines. And so I think, again, to your point, like we never underestimate what a small move can do. It could make a difference. It could make all the difference in the world.
Absolutely. And that's what Latino librarians are doing, right? Notch at a time, also working together. That's so important to actually get things done, move the needle. That's what we are aspiring to do. Now we're going to transition very nicely to a conversation with our guest speakers, and I will introduce them now. They are Manuel Julio Duran Mendez, Reforma Afro-Latina Affinity Group, Graduate Assistant, University Archives, Special Collections and University Archives, and PhD student at the University of Maryland, College Park. Hello, Manuel. I don't know how you prefer to be called, Manuel Julio, Manuel? Yes?
Usually people can't say Manuel,
Manuel,
so
okay.
I tell them Manny or Manuel. But if you can say Manuel, you can say
I can say Manuel. Welcome. All
Gracias.
right. And our next guest speaker is Dr. Jose Luis Benavides, Professor, Department of Journalism, and Director, Tom and Ethel Bradley Center at the California State University in Norwich. Welcome as well. And of course, we know Becky Calzada and Alexandra Rivera. She is the president of Reforma, the National Association to promote library information services to Latinos and the Spanish speaking. And she is also the diversity director at the University of Michigan. And she will let us know more about that when we are in the conversation. But now let's start introducing our guests. And I would like you to let us know if you could share a pivotal moment in your career that inspired you to become a leader in the library field or in academia, in your industry. And the reason that we have you here today is because of your contributions to librarianship, and also because you collaborate, partner, and further the mission of libraries and librarians. So within our theme today of being pioneers of change and shaping the future together, which, by the way, mirrors the national theme for the Hispanic Heritage Month this year, it's very important for us to share those moments. And I hope they are inspirational for our colleagues, and they can also be helpful for many librarians out there. I will start with Alex. Yes.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with everyone. So thinking about my own leadership path and what my original nudge was, and it truly was a nudge, Becky. It was wonderful. You know, I was working within academic libraries as a secretary, as a matter of fact. And I hadn't considered librarianship as a possibility, though I was a long time library user from early on, and as a library worker. And I want to preface that I think that everybody is leading in their own ways from their own vantage points, whether they're librarians, library workers, library allies, et cetera. And we all have that leadership capability. But my road started as a secretary within academic libraries, and I was leading initiatives as a secretary and helping set policy. I was in library administration, and I had a colleague who was who was a ally, a Reforma member, but not Latina, but she had it in her mind that I should become a librarian. And I know some of you maybe have heard this, and she suggested that I attend the conference, the Reforma conference in 2000 in Tucson, which was my home. My father's from Tucson and my mother was from Michigan. So I thought, what a great way to go back and visit. And so I attended that conference and was just so inspired by seeing all these people who were like me. I was working in a predominantly white institution, so I wasn't seeing that at all. And they were developing programs and working so closely with communities and leading by example. They were creative and passionate, and they were all sharing examples of what it means to be leaders within the field. And I went back to the University of Michigan as a secretary and applied to become to the library schools there, with a little nudge from my friend who said, just fill out the scholarship form, just practice your writing skills. I was still kind of on the fence. And not long after, I was accepted. And I'll say that my first taste of leadership happened not too long after that, when an anonymous ally, I don't know who it is, put my name forward, nominated me as the member at large for the Reforma Executive Committee. I had just started library school. And I thought, well, there's another seasoned person on the ballot. I will go ahead and try, knowing that I had no name recognition. And then not long after, I learned that they dropped out, and I assumed that role within my first year of library school. And now I am president. So it's called Giving Back. But I would say that I still look to the leadership examples of Reforma constantly, my Reforma colleagues, to help to guide me. And it's just been a beautiful journey. It's, through ALA and other opportunities for leadership. And I also love to nudge. So I like it the way that you described it. And I'll let someone else share their journey.
Yes. What about Jose Luis?
Well, being an outsider, obviously, I know I feel totally out of place, but I thought about this question, and there are two moments that are significant for me about library, right? And the use, I'm thinking more from the use of the library, right? I grew up in Mexico, so I was raised in Mexico. I went to college in Mexico, and if you know anything about Mexico, it does not have the library system that the U.S. has, right? This country has probably one of the best library systems in the world, right? It's beautiful in terms of access, etc. So coming to the U.S., and I started to be in Austin, Texas. That's where I did my graduate degree. And it was the first time that I saw an open library for university school, right? So you walk into the library, was the Perry Castañeda Library, the PCL was known. You walk into the library, I almost fainted just by seeing that overwhelming sense I have access to all these books, right? And nobody can stop me, and I can browse whatever I want and do, etc. And later on, I discovered at the university the work that Natalie Benson did for the Latin American collection, right? It was my second home, the Library Benson. And I met also an important librarian, a Latina librarian, right? Laura Gutierrez. She was in charge of the library. She was the chief of the library, and there were librarians also that were Latinas or Latinos, right? That help us in the work that we did. So it was an amazing experience for me to be able to access those resources and to learn the significance of having documents and archives that I couldn't have access in Mexico. I did work for my master's thesis on newspapers of the Mexican Revolution that I was able to access at the University of Texas, because they did have the entire collection of these newspapers, right? So I was able to go and read those documents live. So it was a really eye-opening experience. And then the second opening experience for me that leads me to what I'm doing now at the Bradley Center was when I came to Northridge. There was a professor, my mentor, Dr. Ken Kirkton, and he was a very he already had a collection of photography that nobody thought about it, right? When you think about photojournalism and photography in general, you see that there's an absence, especially historical photographs, of people and places that are not necessarily the most common places that happen to be related to the lives of white people, right? So if you think about photography of Los Angeles from the point of view of African American photographers, then you see a completely different place. But there were very few documents, very few photographic collections by African American photographers or by other photographers that were documenting either Latin American life or Chicano life in general. And he already had a collection, but he didn't have the resources to make it happen, right? Until a provost at the university was able to saw the value on this. And then the dean of the library was realized that this was significant, right? And that's the moment that the Bradley Center was created, and also we were able to make this collection not only preserve it properly, right? Because if you don't have access to a library where all these photographs can be preserved properly, then they could be lost. And then the other issue is looking for funding to make these collections, or at least part of these collections, available online, right? And in the case of the topics that and the grants that I've gotten for two collections that we have, we've been doing all that work bilingually, right? So we're doing library work and metadata work, descriptions, etc., in Spanish as well, right? We've created also websites for these projects that are also bilingual. So I think it's very significant to do it, not only because you reach in digital, you reach not only the population that is immediately close to you, but also you reach a population that is larger than that. So it goes to all the Spanish-speaking world as well.
That's fantastic. We do live in Inglés Español.
That's true. That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah. That sounds beautiful, and I'm going to make a note for next time I am in Los Angeles. But let's go to the other coast, to the East Coast with Manuel.
Yes, I'm in the East Coast, so it's 1:34 here. So saludos, buen tiempo, or yeah. Thinking about my journey, just looking at the picture that you had of Reforma and looking at Arnolfo Trego and looking at my old manager, Robin Imperial, in those pictures is making me think about how impactful my library is, which is the Mount Pleasant Library here in Washington, D.C. I work here. Well, this will be my 13th year in the DC Public Libraries. And it's just incredible to think about the people that were here in the Mount Pleasant Library and the impact that they had in terms of Reforma and in terms of other opportunities that ALA or the association has let them lead. And so it's only right that I sit in their shoulders, right? I am so inspired by Robin and her work. I'm inspired by Arnolfo. I'm inspired by Arturo Schomburg. And so some of the work that I'm doing in my journey as a PhD student is looking at Arturo Schomburg's and how we can position Arturo Schomburg as a library and information scientist. Not just a historian, not just a bibliophile, someone who loves books, but someone who dove deep in archives, dove deep in librarianship. And those are the things that inspired me. And I was thinking about the nudging aspect. I think for me, another besides all the luminaries, right? I think about the community. So the community, the Mount Pleasant, Columbia Heights community here in Washington, D.C., pushed me. They didn't nudge me. They pushed me because I was raised in Washington, D.C., but I'm from the Dominican Republic. But elders in the community saw me grow up. And so when they saw me in the Mount Pleasant Library, they pushed me into this process that I am into getting my doctoral degree.
Oh, that is so inspirational. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's also very important to me as a Caribbean person from Puerto Rico to include other Caribbean colleagues when possible, to have this representation, right, from different countries. And in the last symposiums in the last years, we have other colleagues from different countries, South America and so on. And Latinos are so diverse, at least 21 countries, at least, but now, it keeps growing. And so it's so important for us to really bring everyone together. And Becky, I'm going back to you.
So when I think about this particular question, I think about a library leader in our state association. Her name was Martha Rossi. She worked at one of our service centers that are spread out throughout the state, and she reached out and said, have you thought about running as the chair for the Texas Association of School Librarian Division? She knew that I had attended our Leadership Institute that our state association sponsors, and people apply to attend. And she just said, I feel like you have so many ideas to share, and you have so much leadership potential. And she saw things in me that I didn't see in myself. And so, I call that another nudge. And I remember asking her a lot of questions and how much time is this going to take? I don't think she told me all of the truth of that. But one of the things I kind of thought, and I think about what Alexandra shared, is that I just felt like, okay, well, I guess I could try. And I'm a very faithful person. I believe that God is going to put you exactly where you're supposed to be at the moment you're supposed to be. So I thought, let's just see what happens. I'm just going to let go and have faith in where I'm supposed to go. And sure enough, I got this position. And I think when I think about how pivotal it was, I mean, it not only opened me up to working with school librarians across the state, which there was such a diverse representation of librarians across the state of Texas. It also introduced me to the national level participation, which I hadn't done before because I had to attend ALA. I had to come and represent our state division. And so that's where I got to meet other school librarians with AASL. I got to attend events like the award ceremony, like the Buddha Belpre, and I mean, just all the different things. And we have some things like that in Texas, but I think at a national level, it's just exciting to see more of that because I also think too, growing up as a child, I did not see myself in books, and to know that there are opportunities and there's ways to help be a driver in making that happen, helping even like within the people that I work with or the influence that I have at a national organization is a powerful thing. And so I think that's been really a game changer for me in trying to bring the conversation about how we have more diverse representation among the ranks of school librarians, because I also want the students within our spaces to be able to see themselves as a career, a potential career for themselves too. So that was a really big thing for me.
And here we have different experiences and that I hope that bring inspiration and also encouragement and motivation to our librarians out there, because as many of you mentioned, they are the smallest steps perhaps that we can think of, and they are really helping us and catapulting us, right? Like bringing us to collaborate and to partner and to develop bigger things that in this case are helping different communities, academic, public, school libraries, all type of different settings. And I wanted us to start with this inspirational note, but I also think it's important that we do talk about barriers, the barriers that we are facing today. And so we start with a very positive note, but we need to mention that it's important, and not only, right, the barriers that we may face, but perhaps how we overcome them, or how we work with our village, right, with our community, our tribe, to overcome them. And so now we're going to focus a little bit on that, on the barriers. What are the biggest challenges that we have faced as Latinos in our industry, as librarians, or in academia, or school libraries, wherever you are. And that's also important. There are many people facing different type of situations, problems. We know that racism is real, discrimination is real, and we don't want our lives to be just limited by that in a way, but it's real, and we are navigating that, unfortunately. So today, this is another type of message, right? How we can bring some light through our experiences to our Latinos in this quest of bringing change to our country. I will go now to Alex and hear from her experience and her wisdom.
Thank you so much. So this question, it had me thinking back early to earlier experiences, and I'll say probably the biggest challenges are those that I put up in my own mind. I'm thinking of the imposter syndrome that I had and still have as I've taken on additional leadership roles. So moving from librarianship into a deanship at Michigan State Universities was a big thing for me. And so fighting self-doubt, fighting what it means to be the only person of color within a white, predominantly white organization, and especially an all-white leadership team. And it's, it's a struggle, but I feel blessed in many ways. So I will say that there have been times and spaces where my voice has been ignored. I remember early on when I was at the University of Arizona, we were talking about ways to, how can we recruit more Latinos? They had said they wanted to be a Hispanic serving institution. And so I was on this campus-wide committee, and I was brand new member, not even continued yet as a librarian and library faculty member. And I had made the suggestion that why not make the web portal translated into Spanish? And they just looked at me and then ignored me and then moved on. And I had an ally stop the conversation and say, this is important. This is key. And it was the first time that I'd had somebody stand for me in that way. And it gave me an example of what I needed to do for others, but also for myself. And so there are still times when I will maybe share an idea, and I've had, maybe no acknowledgement, and others will come in and say the exact same thing moments later. And they'll get kudos, great idea. And I will usually say something like, thank you so much for appreciating my idea. And I'd love to work with you to implement this. It's nice to have a partner, but I think it's important to lead by example. But for me to step out like that, I need to call on all my ancestors. I need to remember who I am and why I'm here. And so I'm regularly thinking of all of these people who have helped to guide the way for me. Many were in the photos that Loida shared, all of these folks from Reforma who have been in places where I think all of us have been, right? Haven't we all been in these spaces where we maybe haven't felt as welcome? So those are probably the biggest challenges. They're quite often in my mind, but maybe not always. But stepping out and calling on your allies, your ancestors, and friends, and then being that person for somebody else, it makes you stronger. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
I love that. I love that. We are not here in a vacuum, right? Manuel mentioned this earlier too. We're standing on the shoulders of our elders, and we can definitely, this is something very from our culture, right? We can call on our ancestors, our elders, and that's very special, but I believe it's real. And it's another way of helping us in this quest, right? In our journey. Jose Luis.
Well, it's really hard. I mean, you put me after Alex, and she just touched everything else. Everything is so beautiful. What else I can say? I think there are two things that resonated with me. What she said, right? It's true. You always feel like you are not in the place that you were supposed to be, right? I'm a son of parents who went only 3 years to school, right? So finishing a PhD and navigating these spaces and being in another country is like a completely, sometimes you think, oh my God, what am I doing, right? Why am I here? I'm not deserving to be here, etc. So that resonates a lot with me. I think Becky Alex really put these really in a beautiful way. And I think the other issue is what she says in a lot of environments, and that happened. I remember reading an essay by an African American professor here at my university. She was a pioneer, right? She was unique among many other a completely white institution, right? And she reflected exactly on what Alex was saying, right? I spoke in the meetings, and it seems that it was just a pause and everybody listened, and then they move on with whatever else they wanted to do as if I didn't say anything, right? So I think that sense of invisibility, of not being part of it, is hard to take, right? If you are alone, right? And I'm saying this also acknowledging that I came to a department that is completely white when I came to CSUN, right? So all faculty members in the tenure track were white. All the administrators were white, right? So being in that space is really hostile, right? So it really takes you to reach out to other spaces. And I think one of the best advices that I had, and I probably would give that advice as well to others that go into this territory, is try to broaden your spectrum, right? So go outside your field, go outside to find other folks, right? So slowly you will be able to find that many institutions are. You will find people that are like-minded, right? And they could be Latinos or not, but they will be able to help you navigate those spaces.
Beautiful words. If you hear noise, there is some construction and some other things happening outside my office, but hopefully it's controlled. I wanted to mention before we continue with our conversation that anyone with questions, please write them on the chat, on the Q&A box, and we will be checking that and working with it as we move through our conversation. But I can't stop this really inspirational dialogue that we have right now. And I will like to go to Manuel to hear about his experiences related to the challenges, right, that we experience at times.
Yeah, so besides the self-doubt, the imposter syndrome, the voicelessness, and so many other things that we could talk about, but I like to think about it in concepts of like um gatekeepers and like gateways, folks that guide you through a process or through their examples what what it could be. And I think for all that has been said, I think um for us, I think there are more gatekeepers than folks who are guiding us. And I think the younger folks need to be mindful of those challenges that just because we're Latino or just because we're African American or any, that there are folks who are gatekeepers and folks who see other folks as threat instead of seeing them as more of us in this all white field. And so I like to think about those things because I say that because in the public libraries there's a lot of gatekeeping going on and a lot of protection of folks' space and folks fighting over things that shouldn't be fought for, and a lot of nepotism in terms of the folks who, well, administrators who want to work with certain people, and so we have to be mindful of those things as young people. Even though I say to myself that I'm a good follower, I wanna follow, those people that have good leadership skills and leadership attitudes towards everybody. But that's I can add. That's what I can add about the rest.
Emmanuel, it's so real. It's part of the world we live in, and we don't talk about those things maybe sometimes. But this is why we have this space today, and I hope it's helpful for those that are tuning in and for ourselves too, because we also need to talk about those things, right? They are very real, and we experience them, and how to navigate that is not easy, as you mentioned. And it's only through, I will say, this type of dialogues and work with our colleagues and maybe peers that we can do that, navigate that. And this is now kind of another experience, right? I would like to then call Becky into this question.
Thank you. So I concur with everything that everybody has said. Imposter syndrome, being your own barrier. But I love what Manuel was sharing with regard to the gatekeeping. When I think about as leaders, you see things. I kind of wonder, like, I always try to. I like to listen, do a lot of listening. I like to ask a lot of questions. And one of the things that I really work and strive for is to provide a culture that allows people to question respectfully, but in a way that can create change. I think sometimes when things get questioned, people that are receiving the question come from a place of defensiveness, and they and then when you press and ask more questions, their answers are rooted in, well, tradition, or that's how we've always done it, or et cetera. Insert the whatever those reasons are. But I believe as a leader and in making decisions in general that we each have intuitions that I tell people are the compass, our personal compass. And so when it's so important for us to lean in and listen to it, because I have found for me personally that when I'm not paying attention to that first of all, it's always going to guide me where I'm supposed to go. But I also believe too that it could lead us to some positive changes that could have impacts for our users, as in our libraries, for the people that we work with, and could really lead to some change. And so I just appreciate what Manuel was sharing. I thank you for sharing that because, like I said, sometimes we just do things because that's how we've always done it. And I think it's so important now more than ever that we disrupt things that we see that we feel maybe may not be the way or always should be the way.
Yes, and it's so true what you all shared because we are celebrating Hispanic heritage. So I will say we are very unique, right? Every group is very unique, but in this case we are because we're celebrating us today, specifically. And we are very unique and we bring this beautiful sort of like ingredients to what we do. And perhaps we face barriers because of them, but we also can experience success and we can move the needle. We can really impact our communities in different ways. There is a myriad of ways I think that our identities contribute to enrich the spaces that we are moving in. And now I would like, now that we have talked about how beautiful it is that, you know, to be who we are, the barriers that we have experienced that are part of life and we need to talk about them. Now I would like us to kind of go back to a little bit of the uplifting part, but keeping it very real, right? Everything is not only flowers and songs, right? But if you could share with us how this beautiful heritage that we have, that is so diverse, have influenced your approach to life, to librarianship, to your career. I will share first that not everybody in Puerto Rico has such a mixed heritage, but I am part Greek, Taína, Afro-Caribbean, and Spaniard. So it's a very unique kind of a mix in terms of ethnic mix. And so that has shaped me incredibly and in different ways. And I bring that to the work I do. I love to do global work because that's the way I was raised up and grew up. But now I'm interested in you as well. And there are different ways, not only what I described in terms of the specifically kind of maybe genetic makeup, there are other ways. And so I would like to start with Manuel now. Fellow Caribbean.
So you just asking how that shows up? How does my identity show up in the work that I do?
Yes, how your heritage, or it could be identity, right? You could decide, yes, how that's showing up, influencing you.
Being Afro-Latino, being Black Latina, in DC, there's a history of Latino history that has excluded Afro-Latinos. So folks that know about, the DMV know that is majority Central Americans. The main groups are Mexico, El Salvador, and right now I believe is Guatemala. And so we have the array of Latinos in the DMV. But when it comes to writing or discussing our history, usually Latinidad leaves out Afro-Latinos, and including I must say indigeneity. It excludes indigeneity because it just forces us, the mainstream Latinos, to think about only one language, right? Spanish language, which is also our colonized language. We know we have an array of indigenous languages in Latin America that needs the same amount of effort that we put into the Spanish speaking in our libraries, because those populations are coming here. are here in the United States. We have a big Mayan community in the DMV. And so those silences and gaps that situate themselves in our community, those are the ones that I have tried to pay the most attention to in the work that I do. So if that's the indigenous folks, try to see how I can bring that to the library and bring that aspect of Latinidad, or my Afro-Latinidad folks. Those are the community that I say push me the most, because we have such a rich history of Afro-Latinos in the DMV that goes back into the 1900s that hasn't been explored. And so they have been the ones that have been like, you should be the one. You are the one that needs to do this. And that has been very inspirational to me, but humbling at the same time. Because the elders that I know deserve to be known in the wider Latino community. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We need to hear that. We need to talk more about it. Yes, I cannot stress that enough. And I am so glad that actually Reforma has established now an Afro-Latino affinity group. In the most recent years, I think it was kind of put together during the pandemic years. And the last 2 years, I have curated this symposium. I have invited members of that affinity group because it's so important. And I am working on something else with Latino librarians, and we already established that we need to have someone from the indigenous culture, which is not very easy to identify in terms of Latino librarians in the USA, it's so specific. But I have identified someone that has a heritage. And so we'll talk about that at another time. But I bring it up because we are so diverse, and within the notion of diversity, we sometimes don't think about the many other groups that are part of this diversity. And I am sometimes hesitant. I can't claim I'm from this group or the other group, but I am Latina. And so I do know that the complexities within that. And I love to have more conversations about this. And now I will go to Jose Luis, because he's on the other coast and he is working actually with these different themes and being a Latino, but also kind of managing different aspects of different cultures. Though to me, that's fascinating too.
Yeah. I think what Manuel said resonated with me, because that's precisely the space that I would like to fill in, right? Although I grew up in Mexico, so I never really faced the challenges that young people face in this country, right? So, and I think that's an advantage for me, because I never was thought of being different, right? Because I'm mestizo, but the country itself believes he's mestizo in a way that excludes exactly what Manuel is saying, right? The fact that there's Black population in Mexico and the fact that there's indigenous people in Mexico, right? So those groups, I think, coming to the US has sort of helped me think about those issues. And I have developed projects with students in both areas, right? In journalism, I think I've done projects on Afro Latinos, right? And I've done projects also on indigenous people from Oaxaca, which is important for us. Now, the other thing that Manuel mentioned that resonates with what I do and what I'm trying to accomplish here at the Bradley Center is the fact that all that history of LA is obscure, right? And it starts with Latinos. This city, El Pueblo de Los Angeles, was established by a group of 24 families. The majority of them were Black or indigenous. that came from Mexico, right? So the first pobladores of this place were Black and indigenous, and it was not recognized neither in the official history of LA, right, up until mid 20th century, right? See how late that is? And it was not by Latinos, it was by Afro Americans, right, who realized, and they were writing their history and thinking that our history is really rooted here in this city, long way back, right? So we are not really foreigners to this space as there were Afro Latinos here. There were Black people here in LA. The work that we do at the Bradley Center, the work that I do, it has that duality because we have a large collection of African American photography, and you will be surprised how, because we have a lot of photography that still shows segregation, despite the fact that LA might pretend that they were not the South. It feels like the South somehow, right? I remember having a friend from a college friend from Austin, and she's Black, and she's from Dallas. She was born in Dallas, and she said, this place is the most segregated space I've seen, and she's totally right, right? We live in a cosmopolitan city that still has a lot of segregation in it. People live in spaces that are different. So what we are trying to do is to make that visible, right? The history of Black people, the history of Latinos, right? In Los Angeles, in our region, make it visible and make it more abundant in terms of photography and the stories that are behind it, right? So the Latinidad, or at least my background, really explores everything, but I think I would like to put emphasis on those areas, right, that Manuel mentioned.
Yes, and I will offer that coming from Puerto Rico, up until I lived there, we didn't talk about these topics either that much. The Caribbean is another thing, right? You are not this color. We don't talk about the Black people in Puerto Rico. Actually, they mostly our Afro-Caribbeans, I will say, live in Loíza, which is one town at the north of the country, and they are not limited to that area, but they have lived there. And my mom grew up with them, not being from that group. And it's always it's a thorny subject still for our countries and our towns. And but it's part of what we are bringing with us, I will say. And that's what I wanted to ask this question, because it's very real. And we don't see it in our spaces sometimes. We get the blanket Latinos with a certain, for the mainstream population, right, with the maybe sombrero and the jarape, not really recognizing our real diversity. So I really appreciate and thank you for sharing your experiences. I hope they are helpful for everyone that is tuning in today. And now I would like to now go to Alex and Becky and their experiences that I'm sure, I hope, are also inspirational and enriching for the conversation. Alex.
Thank you. So I also am of a mixed heritage. I am Mexican on my father's side and Finnish on my mother's side. So as my mom would say, I'm a Mexifin when I would ask her, what am I? Which was a question I got all the time growing up. What are you? I'm sure many of us have heard that. And then I came, I had a very multiracial family beyond that, folks who married in, Black, Indigenous, Persian. I thought I was from Iran, Persian, until I was 7 and was disavowed. So I really grew up with kind of a global mindset. And for me, it was framed for me as a celebration. So I've, always celebrated difference, and it's probably the most influential in what brought me into into libraries and into my work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, it makes me curious. And there's a term that's coined by researcher, what's her last, Krebs, I can't recall her first name, but she coined the term edge walker. And I think that for me, it means that I'm able to walk in multiple environments and ideally help to bridge differences. That's what I like to do. I like to connect where things seem disparate, make connections, and have folks see the sameness and the beauty in the shared experiences that we have as human beings. So I was struck by this, and it reinforced it when I went to Washington, D.C. recently. I participated in the Intellectual Freedom Summit that was hosted by the American Library Association, and I snuck away to the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Latino that's soon to be, I say soon in the next decade, but it has an annex right now that's sharing a lot, and they really, the primary exhibit right now was highlighting how Latino our existence is also integrated with Afro-Latino and indigeneity, and it really talked about the impact that it had. And it was truly beautiful, and it's something that I'm using as a platform this year for my work with Reforma, and realizing that we are all have various experiences, but together we have power, we have the ability to affect change, and we have the support of one another. No matter what else, it's our Latinidad that brings us together, and something that we can build on. Becky.
And let's not forget that we do have a village. We have a tribe, right? A group that is diverse like us, and we can go to them. And to me, actually, Reforma has been that, among other things. So it's very special, and we are very fortunate to have that. Becky.
I love that. So I have a very, I feel like how I was raised was, I don't know if it was just unique to me, but one of the things I have come to just understand and sort of reckoned with, I guess, is when my parents, or when my mom, my parents, raised me, I had to learn, my language. I was the oldest, eventually my parents brought over my mom's mother and her family from Bolivia. She spoke, Quechua, which is an Indian language, but yet never really spoke it to us. And I think one of the things, I think there was just this tug of war with her, like trying to assimilate in this new country. And of course, then I think again about the school impacts and all, and really just trying to fit in, that I feel often, and I talk to her about this still, it's like, why did you make that decision? She didn't want us to learn her language. We didn't celebrate, or we had some like foods growing up that she used to have, my dad too, but we just didn't do that. And I remember distinctly, especially in college, how I felt like I missed out on so many things. And it's not to say that we did nothing. I mean, my mom was raised Catholic, so we would go to Catholic, to Mass, and my dad was Baptist. So there's just always tug of war for me personally. But I do remember early on, and really, I think it was kind of the impetus of me getting divorced, was thinking about how I missed out on having things. And the irony was, like, growing up, my mom would put up these beautiful carpets that were made of alpaca, or she had these mementos from Bolivia when she lived in Cochabamba. And she wouldn't really talk about them, but I could tell, like, when I think back and I reflect, like, those were important to her. They're still there. But yet she never went back to visit. like her sisters or mother or brother did. It's almost like she said, this is it. I'm not going back. Or, I mean, so it's just, and again, just kind of struggling with that. But I think once I came into myself and was like truly independent and on my own, that I really felt this tug to learn more about who I was and the traditions that I wanted to learn, that I intentionally made that time to go say, okay, mom, I want to learn how you make these very special buñuelos that are not the traditional like Mexican buñuelos. They're more like a bread dough kind of thing. And I want you to show me how you make these special meals. Like she would make, our special meal would be like making some lengua and all these kind of special noodles or whatever, but she never would stop to pause to show us. And I really wanted to capture that because for me, I felt like that there was a gap in my identity personally. And that was, of course, being facilitated in that I wasn't bringing that into my family, right? My kids. And so one of the things so I really kind of think about that in the space that I am right now in trying to like bring that culture in now, or fill in that gap for my kids, but then also now for my grandkids to help them to understand the blood of the different people that runs through their veins so that they understand their culture, but then also to be the impetus to think about what's missing in the work that I do, in not just in representation, but I also think too in the spaces that I am. Like I think when I do work around all the book banning that's happening. I work a lot with OIF. I was on the Intellectual Freedom Committee, and I would say things like, we have none of this information in Spanish. Why not? When we know that so many books are being removed that are by BIPOC characters and authors. And well, we've not done that before. I said, well, what do we do to change that? And so not just also saying it, but also saying, I'm happy to help. I have people that would actually welcome the work, that would do it for free, because when you have Latinx authors saying, do we have this information in Spanish? Because I want to share this with people. People want to do something, but they don't know what to say. Well, we need to, provide materials that provide that information because so many people don't understand. And so I really when I think about my culture and where I come from, I really strive to work on how can I help to be a bridge or connector to make change in the influence of areas that I have, because again, working in a predominantly white profession, or even in my school district, so many don't understand because I work with a predominantly white institution, right? So trying to say, do you realize that when you remove this book, this affects this student? You're thinking about that one parent that's a minority and not the impact of that book removal for a Hispanic kid or a BIPOC queer kid, whatever, all those things, right? And because they don't even think about it, they're just thinking about the parent that's upset. So I really work hard to be that voice, but also to coach people on how to be that voice in a way that's going to affect change and not necessarily kind of be this, like, I'm just fighting with you, but to listen and to say, have you thought about this? Have you considered that? So that we're not making emotional decisions, reactionary decisions that could harm and impact students and the readers that are in our libraries.
And that's so important because we know it's an unfortunate reality in the country for the last years. And librarians are the glue, right? We are really keeping it together. And I just find so beautiful when the community also say, well, the library is very important and we need to support it, but it's due to the work that you all do, we all do. They value the library. Let's just keep a little bit with the theme, right? Of what we are bringing into the work we do based on heritage. But now let's think about how we can use all these, right? All what we are, all our experiences to encourage, motivate, perhaps provide some words of wisdom to the younger or newer generation, right? The emerging leaders that sometimes we call. What is the advice that we have based on all these experiences? What would you say to Latino librarians or students that are aspiring to enter our profession? And Jose Luis might not be a librarian, but he works with the library, so he has those experiences, right, as well. And I think it's so important now that we have kind of mentioned, right, the different aspects during this conversation. What are ways that we will now kind of encourage and motivate our newer generation? And I would like to go to Manuel. He's also part of the newer generation, but
I'm the
perhaps
youngest. I was like, I'm the youngest. Oh my God.
yes, it's great to inspire others, right? They're in our same bracket, maybe.
I think I'll go back to my other theme of being a good follower. Notice to the younger emerging leaders to know the traits of a good leader, what you desire, what ambitions you have, and know that there are consequences. There's some things that we have to pay to be a good leader. Like, it's not gonna be rosy. There's certain tickets that we have to pay that at the end of the day will make will make you a better leader. If you are trying to get into this field as a Latino, I will say do it immediately. I believe the statistic is 89% white and 2% Latino in the nation. And so wherever you are in your process, whether you're a library worker, whether you're a tech, I hope you have someone in the libraries that inspires you to help our communities. Notice the trait and be ambitious. Yeah, that's what I would say to them.
Yes, and there's nothing wrong with it. I can tell you, it's great to be ambitious and work with others. I mean, there is a combination of things, right? That is for the awesome sauce, right? So thank you for sharing that, because it's okay, yes, to be all the things that you mentioned when we are working with other ingredients. And I'm curious about all those other ingredients. Alexandra Rivera.
So, first of all, I just want to say that being a librarian and working in libraries, it's a beautiful profession. I encourage you to explore, because there's so many avenues you may start. I thought I was going to be a public librarian when I first began this journey, and my heart is with public libraries, but I was able to bring in the things that I loved about public librarianship into my own profession, outreach, engagement, instruction, building those connections. And I was encouraged, again, we talked about mentors. I encourage you to seek mentors, and as my example shows, the more that you get involved with the profession, and for me, it was professional organizations, I encourage you to explore those. There are so many. I've been a member of Reforma since 2000. And the cost for joining any of these organizations as a new librarian or student is very, very low. It's a low entry point, and you're going to build your cohort instantly. You'll have opportunities to seek grants, formal internships, mentorships, et cetera. And I'm going to encourage you too to consider attending some of these upcoming conferences. So obviously ALA is something that you can gain from. I've been a member of ALA almost as long as Reforma, and have served in leadership roles there and currently sit on council. But it's within these smaller conferences. So Reforma is having its national conference next year, September 18th through 21st in Long Beach, California. I saw the site. It's going to be beautiful. And I encourage all of you to attend. I know that the prices will be lower, and I lay odds there'll be scholarships. I also want to put out a call to, I mean, I belong to all of the National Associations of Librarians of Color, just because have had so many allies in all of them, and I feel that I learned from everybody's practice. But I also am the president of the National Council of Joint Librarians of Color, and we put on a conference every 4 years, and we're going to have our next one October 7th through 11th, 2026 in Spokane, Washington. And we'll be putting out a call soon for volunteers. So if you want to learn about some of these different initiatives, take a look out for that call. I'll put my email in the chat before we leave so that you can reach out to me. But find ways to get involved, and don't be shy, because we're all here and want to help you. That's the beautiful part. I learned that I had so many people in my corner I didn't even know. So just know you have a bunch of us here, right here on the screen, waiting to assist you at any moment. And so those are my suggestions.
That's beautiful, Alex. And I know we are all united in those sentiments as well. And Becky is coming from the end of school librarians, which are very close to my heart since my mom was a school librarian. And sometimes this group, it's really face big challenges in terms of huge budget cuts and the understanding of maybe administrators on the importance of school libraries. And so I think it's very, you are all very important. We are all very important, but I feel like sometimes school librarians really are going through it, right? And so Becky, I think it's also very inspirational and timely, the advice or your words for these newer, perhaps school librarians, or if they are library students, right? They're thinking about then going next to school libraries. Yes. Well,
Yeah. I would say the first thing would be to dream big and never give up on a dream, because I think once you put that wish out there and you aspire, it gives you a goal to set and to work towards. I think the next advice, I think about what Manuel said about leaders, and we learn from the people if we pay attention. I always tell people, like, kind of be an anthropologist and watch, listen, learn, what are the takeaways. We can learn so much by just listening and learning and watching, whether they're a really great leader or whether they're even not a great leader. You learn from that too. You learn what not to do. I also think too, when you have those opportunities, ask, anybody you think, could offer that advice, like seek them out to just ask more about their journey. What did they learn? What advice would you pass along? I think that I know I'm always willing to share. I love to meet people. Even though I don't mind being with a lot of people, but I have to retreat a little bit and kind of just go get some time to myself after a while. But I think we all do that. But I just think too that there's power in learning about one another's journey and gleaning from that, because there's lessons to be learned. And I'm of the belief that maybe I might have struggled in my journey, but I don't believe that somebody else has to struggle. I'd love for somebody to benefit from what I've learned. And so thinking about ways to pay it forward, whether it's, somebody that's emerging or just something that's even considering, like what questions do you have, and answering those, because that could be a game changer for somebody that's considering a career. So.
I agree. I agree. And I think it's also very important, right? Because sometimes schools, they are very, very, very busy. And sometimes they are 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 very, very busy Beautiful, beautiful. Let's close it with Jose Luis, Dr. Benavides.
Like I would be brief on this. Obviously, I don't have advice for young librarians. I work a lot with archivists, right? And I think the stereotype of the archivist is that, and we've been told this in a history conference, which was ridiculous, that was at our campus, that the stereotype is somebody who's an introvert and doesn't want to interact with people, right? So people that are shy, they should go and study archivists. It's ridiculous. It's really wrong. It's the wrong idea. An archivist is really an important profession, especially nowadays, because a lot of these archives turn into digital items, right? That are out there, and the archivists really are the first point of entry of any collection, right? So the process of discovery that archivists go through is just unequal, right? You learn a lot about whatever is in front of you, that you have to make sense of it, and a lot of our collections are like that. Like a photographic collection doesn't come in boxes with labels, right? So the archivists had to figure out what in heaven is there before they can write something for the public to know what is in this collection, right? So it's a very interactive. Also, they interact a lot with people, right? So it's not really what this stereotype of what an archivist is. And I think I would encourage young people to join that part of library, right? Because I think is a very exciting moment to do it, and there's a lot of excellent work that could be done there.
That's so good because there are so many different workers within librarianship, and the documentalists, as I was saying in Spanish, los documentaristas, and then archivists and all that. So I'm so glad that you brought it up to enrich this conversation. So appreciated that. Now we're getting to our the last part of our conversation, and I think it's important that we also celebrate our successes, the different maybe partnerships or initiatives that you all have. I think it might be again inspirational, and others can see how you fellow Latinos are doing this, and it's also possible for them to start initiatives, different efforts. So I will ask for everyone to see if they can share specific initiatives. And this is cool, right? You can talk now about the things that you're doing with your different groups and communities. If you can share specific initiatives or projects you've been involved in that you believe have made a significant impact in the communities you work with. And we know communities come in different shapes, and it could be academic, public, school. They are different, right? Communities in which we have libraries as well. And I'm going to go to Becky.
Great. So I think of two things off the top of my head. One of them is more like centered on the libraries that I work with in my particular area of Texas. And then the other one is kind of centered on just impact across. So with our school libraries, one of the things that I've been really proud of is we passed, our school district passed a bond initiative for funding for us around makerspaces. And we wanted big things. We didn't want like little tiny robots or anything like that. We wanted one 3D printer, at least one 3D printer in each of our libraries. And we wanted a high-end Mac computer in each of our libraries. And we have 45. With the intention that those two things could level the playing field for any students in our spaces, because for the most part, you had to be in a special class to have access to a very high-end computer, or you had to be in a CTE class, a career technical class, to get to a 3D printer. And when I think about what school libraries are about, they're about access and they're about equity. You shouldn't have to be in a special class to have those kind of special pieces of equipment. So it was passed, and we love now that students are able to come to them and use them. They set up like an appointment and they submit their designs and they print. It doesn't cost them anything. It's free because the idea is that one, they have access to that, but two, we set up challenges for them to be creative and everything. But because we also know that those technology tools can propel them to consider things that maybe they hadn't thought about, possibilities for themselves. And so that's one thing. The other thing that I think about is freedom fighters. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Texas Freedom Fighters, FREADOM. So back in 2021, when we were kind of going through our book challenges in Texas, my friend Carolyn Foote and I were very frustrated about the names that librarians were being called. And so we launched a Twitter hashtag takeover with the Texas Ledge to share how important books are to people and what they mean to us, because all they were talking about were the bad things that they thought, or whatever the negative perceptions were. And one of the things that I'm proud of is the fact that people recognize that hashtag. In fact, it's used so many times over and over again. And it really kind of came from a place of being frustrated about the negative things being said about librarians, the negative things about books, when we knew that, all these beautiful books were representation of the different people that we serve in our communities and that are windows to the world and the world that we live in. And so I'm just really proud of that, because it was, I believe it's one of the original grassroots efforts before things like Unite Against Book Bans started getting organized and that sort of thing too.
That's amazing work. Great team, Becky. Thank you for sharing that. It's so encouraging in terms of the school librarians. And it's a win for them. It's a win for all of us too.
Yep, we're all interconnected.
Yes. Alex.
Thank you. I'm loving this question because I know I'm going to get some ideas of ways that I can bring them into my own practice. A couple of initiatives that I have had the bounty of being able to participate or lead. While I was at the University of Arizona, as well as the University of Michigan, we had a peer information consulting program, which is, we called it the PIC program in both places within academic libraries. And we hired minoritized students and trained them in reference and research, as well as grounded their outreach and engagement strategy skills and student success techniques. And then we had them working within the communities, their peer communities, such as the Multicultural Center. We brought them into the Writing Center hub that was in the libraries, as well as had them at the reference desk, as well as placing them in library committees and having them assist with our instruction and working with our web UX teams to help to inform our own practice within libraries. And they even helped with outreach activities, which I was involved in, which were pipeline programs with K-12 students. And while this was helping to build on the theory, we know it's true that when folks see people like themselves, they're more likely to approach them. And it's true, when I would sit on the reference desk myself, I didn't get as many questions as if I had these students sitting there with me, and the students would just crowd around and ask them great questions. And I would utilize them in instruction. And I think my students listened to them far more than anything that I could share, even though we were saying the same information. But they helped me with pipeline programs, and just having their presence in these various spaces resonated so much. We know that our profession is not, it's very homogeneous, and having these students who brought a diversity as well as perspective of student and varied social identities helped to improve our programs and services within the libraries. I talked about the Joint Conference of Librarians of Color, and that has been a passion project for me. I've been involved with it since the very first one in 2006. But now that I'm in my dean's role, I don't get the opportunity to work as closely with these students. But what I do get to do is help guide my staff by removing barriers and helping them learn about different opportunities to improve their own practice. And so some things that we've had are we've developed a deeper engagement with the Migrant Student Services Program. We're looking to have office hours within their building. They serve the students here that are migrants, children of migrant workers within the state of Michigan and elsewhere. And we also are building a relationship with the Julian Zamora Latin Research Institute here. And so those are just two very small examples, helping to, they're doing more exhibits that illustrate the beautiful holdings that we have around Latino, the Latino research. And so that has happened. And we have a Cesar Chavez collection that one of our Latino librarians started ages ago, but we're building on that and helping to elevate its existence. And I'm fortunate to have communications in my within my portfolio. And so we are doing a lot around social media and other things to bring awareness to these students. And it's exciting. It's really exciting. So those are just a few things. And yeah, it's a great place to be. Though I do miss working directly with students. I love them so much.
I like that you mentioned social media and a little bit of technology, because that's part of what we do. And it's the emerging technologies, that's another set, right? That's another maybe program, but they are part of what we do. And we have to find ways of including them as well. But I will go now to Jose Luis, Dr. Benavides.
Thank you. Thank you. We try to engage the community in everything we do, right? So all our projects really are meant to have a component that it is educational or tries to engage the community, even because these are digital collections, right? You're digitizing them, but that doesn't mean that people will find them, especially in the kind of environment in which we live in, right? There's so much stuff out there on the web that the fact that people will not find them easily. So we do stuff along with it. The farm worker project that we just finished, for example, we created a physical exhibition, right, that can be taken to different places, and we put it in a museum here in Los Angeles. It's now in place in Los Angeles. And we came up with this time with a different idea, not only to create a website that has information about it and links to all the photographs that we have, right? But also create a do-it-yourself exhibition. The Smithsonian does this for the history program, essentially panels that you create for educational purposes that are meant for schools, union halls, nonprofit organizations, just to print them. You make them available to anybody who is willing to do an exhibition. It depends on the space that they have. They can do different sizes, right? And put QR codes there that will allow for whoever looks at this exhibition to go into the digital collection, right? So we're always working on that. We do a lot of video as well. YouTube is an important venue for us. So we use photographic material, oral histories, etc. And to us, I think I have two examples of very rewarding ways in which we learn what people do with that, right? For the farm worker movement, I have the grandchildren of one of the unrecognized leaders of the movement, which is, his name is Julio Hernandez, and his wife, Fina Hernandez, right? So we have photographs of both. We have their stories, and we have somebody saying, these were very important people in the movement, right? Nobody knows of them, but somebody watched the video, and their grandchildren watch it, right? And they said, the comment in our YouTube channel was, I always heard my parents telling me the story of my grandfather and my grandmother being in the movement, but I've never seen it in the textbooks, right? So thanks for doing this. So I think to me was that little comment was really significant, right? It's just one person, it's just one family, but they felt that we were doing exactly what we wanted to do, elevate the stories of everybody in the movement, not necessarily only of the leadership, right? And then another example that I have for you, it relates to Black community in Colombia. I put in the chat the link to the collection to San Basilio de Palenque. We have accidentally, I mean, this is nothing that we planned, the collection of Richard Cross, which was a photographer, an American photographer that started his career going to Colombia in the Peace Corps, and he was recruited by an anthropologist in Colombia, Nina de Friedman, and she was doing pioneering work in the Black communities of Colombia, right? So she was on the West Coast, and then she was on the East Coast in the Caribbean, and working in the Caribbean, she was doing work in this little place, Palenque de San Basilio. They claim to be the oldest, the first free enslaved community recognized by the Spanish crown since 1691 as a free community, right? As a community of free people and not people that were enslaved. This is a community of people that came through Cartagena, right? And that escaped their subjugation as slaves, and they created a community up in the highlands. So the photographs we have are in the 70s. There's still a moment of transition in the community. They still preserve a lot of their traditions, right? They speak a language that is called Palenquero, is the only pidgin language in Spanish that mixes the Spanish and African languages. And recently we were approached by a group of artists from Palenque de San Basilio who've been working on these photographs, right? And I'm about to go and visit them because they've been doing art using the photographic material that we have. So we're having an impact outside the country with a community of Spanish-speaking people, or Spanish as a second language in some cases, people that are significant for the idea of Latinidad, etc. So for us, it's always a very rewarding process to do these projects.
You mentioned something important. You introduced something that expands of what we have mentioned before. Maybe Manuel mentioned a little bit, and I mentioned a little bit about that, how we do have pockets, very important pockets in our Latin America that are from the Black community, and we can kind of identify where are they. It's very interesting because currently the Vice President of Colombia is a wonderful woman, Francia Marquez, and she's from the Cauca, though the Department of the Cauca in Colombia, and she is Afro-Caribbean, and it just had brought a whole different perspective and activism to the role as well.
Yeah, for us, sorry to continue, but yeah, Colombia is doing an Afro museum, a Museo Afro, is the third country in the continent that is building a museum dedicated to the history of people of African descent, right?
Yes.
Is the US, Brazil, and now Colombia. And they're going to be using some of our photographs from our collection, right, for the new museum. So we're
Next trip has to be to Colombia.
Yep.
Manuel, over to you.
I can talk about two initiatives that one is that some libraries or some public libraries have the fortunate enough or have been fortunate enough to once you have or know a different language, you get some sort of benefits to have that service for the community. Our library did not have that services where the folks who spoke Spanish was just doing it because of the kindness of their heart and because their work in the community. So now I can say that in our system, folks who pass through certain exams of competency in Spanish can get paid a little bit more to provide that services so the community. So that's one initiative that for a really long time with Robin Imperial, we have been advocating for the system to give folks, whether they speak French, whether they speak whatever languages that they speak, that a little bit of money should be given them so that they could give those services to the communities that need those whether it's translation, whether it's programs. For a really long time, I was in charge of all the Spanish collection in Mount Pleasant and translating and providing programming for them without, asking for nothing, but it was like, this is my community and this is what we do. And this is just a service. But as time, it got to a point where it's like, I'm about to burn out too. So I think I need to advocate for not advocate for myself, but advocate for the next generation of folks who need this, so that they don't have to pass through the same struggles that I had to pass. So I can say that now folks who speak another language get those benefits, and that's a good initiative. And then the next initiative, I think La Profe Rivera talked about Presente, and there's two, the Presente exhibition at the American Latino Museum, and there's two folks. One is a family, the Grillo family, which has wonderful photos. Let me, I think I have it right here. I'm sorry. The Grillo family scrapbook. I'll post it in the chat for everybody. Who are a group of Afro Cuban family that comes to the United States and settle in Washington, D.C. And they, it's a less known history of Washington, D.C. And I was the initial spark that started that with the Grillo family and engaging them and telling them that it was necessary for their story to be out there in the national limelight. And also Casiel Luna, who is another elder in our community, who also pushed me. She's a 97, 98 years old Black Dominican who definitely set the trail for me and for many other people in the community in her activism, including the libraries, where she feels very proud that a lot of the Mount Pleasant Spanish collection she advocated for. So those are the two.
Oh my goodness, you mentioned something earlier that's so important, right? The recognition for our skills, so important. And there are many jobs in the federal government and local city level that actually do include incentives for language. And so the fact that there is a library doing that is very encouraging. And so it's amazing work, Manuel. You and your colleagues. And also, obviously, we're so proud of the museum work. It's so beautiful. It really makes me feel so proud when I went there for the first time earlier this year. Beautiful work that preserves our history and shares right part of our identities with others. We are about to close, but I want to take a quick look at the chat. I don't know if everybody has seen this, but there is a colleague that shared also an initiative, or it's let me just look here. It's medical Spanish. And this, it's so important. We do know the experiences of our, I'm going to say, neighbors, where they need to bring sometimes young kids to talk to the health practitioners about adult matters. And not only to health, it goes for maybe many government offices, but this is just beautiful work. And I copy the link because I want to look more into that. Carlos, if you find my email, loidagarciafibo@gmail, please do feel free to email me this info. Very interesting. Thank you. We are at the end of our conversation, very long conversation. I do hope that when the recording is available, that you share with your colleagues, with your new librarians, with others in library information sciences, in the library schools as well, because these topics are so important and we get to discuss them perhaps once per year. They're part of our daily lives. But before we go, I would like to ask our speakers very kind of a lightning round of the final remarks, very short. What is the one thing that you want our librarians to take away from today? And I will just go in the direction of my screen. I'll start with Alexandra. Alex?
I actually have 3 very short things. So you're already a leader. You're bringing an expertise from your own life experiences, and you're building on that regularly. So don't let imposter syndrome get in the way. You're already a leader. You need to lean and nurture your community and help it to grow. And just remember that you're not alone. And finally, if you want to learn how you can get more involved with Reforma or JCLC or anything else, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to connect you. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. Dr. Benavides.
I will second what Alex was saying. Find groups. I mean, when you go into this profession, you already bring stuff that you know, but also find groups that will help you further your goals. Find your community, join the community early on. A lot of people can help you if you seek out, and you can find a family, right? You can find that community there. So it is very important.
Thank you. Becky?
So I affirm all those. I think, lean into your strengths, but also recognize your areas for growth, because those are opportunities. And then I think finally also to just make time to find people that you can connect with so that you can grow and build your capacity in the area you want to learn in.
Absolutely. Emmanuel?
Yo quiero nada más decir gracias. I concur with everyone, but I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak to all of you, and I'm hoping to see all of you in this field.
I want to thank you all before welcoming Dr. Shao back. Your leadership really motivates and inspires others seeing us on the screen, because, as I said earlier, Latinos are so diverse, and we need to see that diversity reflected in what we do. And so that was part of my goal today, and I'm very appreciative of your contributions to today. We are strengthening our community, our library workers, librarians, communities, and that's so important. We need more of that, I think. And that will also make our libraries more welcoming and responsive spaces for all. And I will leave you with that thought. And then I will turn this back to Dr. Shao.
Again, muchas gracias for joining us today. We're so honored to hear the experiences and wisdom of our keynote speaker and panelists. Special congratulations to Becky for being the first AASL president from a Latina background. Let's give them all a loud round of applause. I'm also proud to say that I'm the first person of color to be the director of the School of Information at San Jose State. And all of you honor me and honor the work that we are doing to ensure that we're strong in equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I will mention that as an Asian American growing up in the Deep South, one of the things that I learned is you must not define what you can be by the expectations of others. That in fact, you must become who you want to be and what you can do, not based on the expectations of others. Also, special thanks to our iSchool team and staff and students who made today possible. This includes our EDI students assistants, Matsuko Friedland, Nicole Azoff, marketing director Nicole Perviance, events coordinator Vivian Zuo, and our technology student assistants Samantha Fatavero and Heather Grosso. And finally, our Library Technology Integration Lab coordinator, Alfredo Alcantar. So this long list shows you that a commitment to EDI means we must prioritize it and also allocate resources to it. And the San Jose State University iSchool is proud that we are up to this challenge. We're also honored to be #1 most diverse MLS program in the nation, if not the world, as we're #1 across all racial categories, including educating as of spring 2023, 36% of all MLS candidates of Hispanic Latino ethnicity. Please visit our resource center in the Hispanic Latinx Cultural Heritage. Let me drop that link here. Also, again, please subscribe to our EDI channel, where we have now 3 years of recordings from leaders from all different communities in our Heritage Month Symposia. And also would like to advertise our upcoming symposia. So our next one is Native American Heritage Month for next month, led by Jonah Payton, the president of the American Indian Library Association, and also SJSU iSchool class of 23. And her working theme is Native Peoples and Libraries and Archives. And let me include our resource center there. Again, that's 3 years worth of information about serving the Native American communities through libraries. Next will be our Black History Month in February, led by our new student, Black Student Library Collective, and the California Librarians Black Caucus, who we are a proud sponsor of. So let me include the Black History and Cultural Heritage Resource Center here. And also, finally, I want to introduce Loida and I's new endeavor. We are, I think, common troublemakers together. We are working on something called the ALA Think Tank in our new, or our first inaugural one we built, what we call Building Bridges, Democracy, Peace, and Conflict Resolution in the Modern World. And we have strategically decided to offer this a week before the election because we know that win or lose, that there's going to be some disruption. So let me include a link to that. And then finally, we have heavily invested in XR technology and have developed 3 immersive virtual reality spaces using browser-based hyperlinks. And let me include those 3. One is Children Draw War, Not Flowers, which is an art exhibit from Ukrainian children led by 40 public libraries in Ukraine. Number 2 is Seeking Immortality, which is an IMLS-funded digital preservation, language, and culture project with the Northern Cheyenne. And then finally, we're most proud of our new Freedom to Read Banned Books Metaverse, which is in collaboration with ALA and Books Unbanned, as well as Little Free Library. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Muchas gracias to all. Have a wonderful day and a great Hispanic Heritage Month. And if I could ask the panelists to stay just for a second, we must have our picture together
Yes.
so that we could share via social media. Thank you so much for joining us.